It is one day into Toronto FC's off-season, and already the house cleaning has begun. GM Ali Curtis, who was hired back in the 2018-19 off-season by Toronto FC, has been, well, mutually terminated. However, given the way the season has gone, I think that this was a little more than just a mutual termination. This is the first official move Toronto FC has made this offseason. Yesterday, literally less than an hour after the Canadian Championship finished, there were reports flying around that Jozy Altidore's contract was being mutually terminated and that he was set to become a free agent. I'll get into that when the club makes an official announcement about it. However, for right now, we are going to talk about Ali Curtis. Ali Curtis came in as Toronto FC GM in the offseason between 2018 and 2019, and immediately he was thrown into the Giovinco conundrum. And of course, Giovinco wanted a contract which, by all regards, looks way too large, especially considering what he ended up doing in Saudi Arabia. I know, fantastic player for TFC, and I wish we kept him, but from a contract perspective, it made sense. Loses Giovinco, signs Pozuelo as Giovinco's replacement, which by all means is a great signing. However, I don't think we can give Ali Curtis the credit for that one, as Pozuelo was a guy who had been on TFC's radar for years prior to Ali Curtis coming into the role. So the 2019 season happens, TFC has a slow start, picks up mid-season, has that magical undefeated run at the end of the year, goes into the playoffs, magical run all the way to MLS Cup, where they inevitably lost to the Seattle Sounders. The next season in 2020, COVID year with the shortened season and all that, TFC, fueled by Ayo Akinola having a fantastic breakout year and Alejandro Pozuelo having an MVP caliber season, TFC runs to second in the Eastern Conference, but falters near the end of the year, loses out on the Supporters' Shield in the last couple of games, and loses in the first round of the playoffs, being upset by Nashville. And following that season, Greg Vanney left, giving Ali Curtis full control over player personnel and the coaching position, which he had not had a chance to assign, as Vanney had been in the role when he came in. And we all know how this turned out. He hires from the New York Red Bulls, where he came from, Chris Armas. And Chris Armas was a disaster, to say the least. A terrible, terrible 3 months, I think, as coach of Toronto FC. 13 games in which the team won 1 game in MLS and was on 5 points on the season. Chris Armas pretty quickly got fired after just 13 MLS games, and Ali Curtis promotes assistant coach Javier Perez to the new coach. Perez fares a bit better, but at that point it had been too late. Toronto FC season already in the gutter. They go through, miss the playoffs, and lose in the Canadian Championship final. And thus, the GM spot is now reopened for Toronto FC, and it seems like a head coaching spot will also be open as well very soon. Ali Curtis, just none of the moves he really made for Toronto FC, I think, outside of the super draft, were very good. 2019, he had a solid start. I'm not going to lie about that one. Bringing in Omar Gonzalez mid-season actually did really help the team back then, but the long-term impacts of that move seem to potentially outweigh the short-term benefits that it gave us. But at the time in 2019, that seemed like a good move. Then also in 2019, he did the Patrick Mullins trade, which I've never liked and has just seemed to gotten worse as the years go on, as Patrick Mullins continues to not really provide anything new to this team. For the 2020 season, he has to bring in his first designated player after buying down Michael Bradley to a TAM level contract, getting Michael Bradley down from a very expensive DP contract to a TAM level contract. That was actually not a terrible move. Then he brings in, as his first designated player, Pablo Piatti. And Piatti, well, COVID kind of saved the Piatti start to the season, as Piatti was injured at the very beginning of the year, and then the fact that COVID delayed the season meant when the season inevitably started back up, he was almost healthy. I think he missed the MLS's back tournament, but then when that season actually did start back up, he was healthy and ready to go. Actually, no, he missed the first game of the MLS's back tournament, but he was ready to go pretty much when the MLS season did finally start back up after COVID hit. But overall, Pablo Piatti wasn't the greatest addition to Toronto FC, the greatest designated player for Toronto FC. As far as DP signings go, Piatti played like a decent TAM player, but didn't really have the pizzazz of a designated player in MLS. I also forgot that in 2019, Richie Laryea was brought in on waivers. That was actually a good move also. That was made by Ali Curtis. And then comes the 2021 season. I'm not gonna lie, a lot of the roster moves for this season just didn't really make sense. We saw, and if you go back and watch my old videos, I talked about the glaring holes this team had in their lineup for this season, and Jefferson Soteldo was a fix for one of those. He was actually a designated player, quality designated player. He was fantastic. I know he was a controversial topic among TFC fans this year, but Jefferson Soteldo, for the most part, I actually liked. It was just unfortunate that Soteldo was a setup guy, and due to injuries to Akinola and Altidore all season, Soteldo was a setup guy that really had no one to set up. Then we have the problems of strikers, which we said, with Altidore being a very often injured guy, Patrick Mullins not being the best. So his solution to that, Ali Curtis's solution to that, was Dom Dwyer, who somehow was worse than Patrick Mullins was this season. Dom Dwyer was invisible pretty much the entire season whenever he was on the pitch for TFC. I can't think of anything significant he did for the club this season. That was not a very strong signing. Then we look at the back end, where we have Mavinga, and that's about it going into the season. He gets Eric Zavaleta down to a much cheaper contract as he was a free agent, and surprising that Zavaleta came back after Vanny was gone, but Nephew remains all the same. Didn't get another center back, which I think the team really needed, and I think the team still needs to go with Chris Mavinga, especially this season because of how hurt Chris Mavinga was. And they did sign Luke Singh after he had a great game in the Champions League, but then after that, Luke Singh disappeared, didn't play as well, and was kind of put out of sight, out of mind from the first team roster. The only addition he made on the back end was bringing in Kemar Lawrence, who, well, decent, just never really provided anything extra for Toronto FC, and they ended up playing Kemar Lawrence at center back more often than at left back because Richie Laryea had taken over the left back spot and was completely rocking it in that role. So bringing in Kemar Lawrence to play left back, and they never really play him there, and they end up putting him at center back, wasn't the greatest move for Toronto FC. They probably should have just gone for a straight out and out center back instead of spending the TAM money on Kemar Lawrence. And what this team looked like all season was a team that had glaring holes but didn't have the salary room to fix them. And injuries hurt anyone who really could have come in and made an impact. Imagine this team if Mavinga, Priso, and Akinola would ever get hurt. Forget the designated players, just those three guys all season playing for this lineup. We're probably looking at a completely different story. Ralph Priso was having a breakout season. Ayo Akinola was hurt very early on into the Javier Perez reign. After Perez came in, if those three guys stayed healthy the whole way through, it could have been a completely different season. But alas, could have, would have, should have. It just didn't work for TFC. Personnel that they had weren't good enough, and the injuries that they had were too much for anything to happen for TFC this year. And after 3 straight years where the problems that existed in this team kind of always existed through all 3 of them, like the positions that we have been trying to fix, that Ali Curtis tried to fix in each of the 3 seasons, were the same problems. Multiple different guys brought in at left back, Tony Gallagher, Kemar Lawrence, just rotating, multiple different wingers brought in, Erickson Gallardo, Nicolas Benezet, Pablo Piatti, Jefferson Soteldo. He kept swinging and missing the same issues, And because he kept missing the same issues and trying to refix the same issues, he never turned his attention to things that became issues as time went on, like at striker and like at center back. So as far as GM moves go, Ali Curtis really just wasn't it. So now, open GM spot for TFC, and Bob Bradley, the former coach of LAFC, Michael Bradley's father, is available. And he could come in and really do both roles, or have a role like Greg Vanney had, where he's more involved in player selection and player scouting than Javier Perez and Chris Armas were. That's just a theory, but it is the leading theory, and Bob Bradley coming to coach his son just seems fitting. So there we have it. Today, November 22nd, 2021, marks the end of Ali Curtis's tenure as the general manager of Toronto FC. A new era is about to begin. That is it for this video. If you liked it, hit like. If you want to see more of my stuff, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. Link is down below in the description, and I will see you next time.